they've done studies that show that reading fiction can help. It helps us put us in each other's shoes. So if you're reading a book and you're experiencing things that a character is experiencing, it actually lights up the same pathways in your brain. They've done all sorts of tests and things that show that if someone is reading about, a person jumping into a cold pool, the same areas of their brain light up as though they themselves were jumping into a cold pool. So you think about all the different things that you can experience through a book. And realistic fiction, you're experiencing things you probably never would have experienced in your own life. You're processing things, but you're at a little bit more of a distance. It gives you that a little less of the immediacy, so that it gives your brain and your emotions time to kind of sort through and understand and figure out, like, oh, this is what trauma feels like. This is how I could deal with it and adjust and whatever.
You're listening to Know It, Live It. I am your host, Laura Hanson Brexa. Each week I have an insightful conversation with a fascinating person who shares their life mission, determination, passion, principle, or spiritual journey. Today I have Trenna McMullin, who is an author who wrote her first full-length novel at the age of 16. 16, amazing. I wanted to talk to her about this passion for writing. Thank you for having this conversation with me today.
You're welcome, Laura. Thanks for having me on.
I want to know how you knew writing was something you had to live.
So it's kind of interesting because I've always loved stories. Like, I remember even way back when I was just a toddler going to the library with my mom, picking out storybooks, and we'd sit and read them together. So I always loved stories. And then when I learned how to read myself, I actually just ate up every book I could get my hands on. In third grade, I remember I'd read underneath the desk during class, which was bad. I don't recommend that to people, but I loved it. Something about immersing myself in someone else's story just absolutely fascinated me. And so then kind of moving forward from there, I remember having some writing assignments, and I think it was also third grade. We had to write a story, some short 2-page, whatever narrative thing. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, this is something people do. Like, people can be authors, they can be writers. And I knew that, like, that's something that I would absolutely love to do, but it felt like it was this, super unattainable, like, writers, they're like, they're famous and they're whatever, like, that's not something I could do, but I wanted to really badly. And then in 4th and 5th grade, I lucked into, I say luck, I think it was a blessing that I had a teacher who focused just a ton on writing. I mean, I think every week or two we were writing a new story and trading with each other and editing each other's work and doing things. And mine, we'd be assigned a 3 or 4 page story and I'd turn in 12 pages. And the people in my group were always like, what are you doing? Like, this is stop giving us more work. Yeah, she ended up dedicating my first book to her and all the other teachers that impacted my writing, because it was just, I don't know, it was excellent for me. But even at that point, I think I still felt like, this is something I love to do, but it's not necessarily something, like, I could never get anything published, like, kind of thing. So it wasn't until I started writing kind of on my own after that, like, if I had a hard day or if I was bored or, whatever as a kid, if I was done with playing outside. I live in Montana. The winters are super cold. So, playing outside was sometimes you go outside and 15 minutes later, you're like, my fingers are frozen, I'm going to go inside. And so I'd either be reading or writing after that point. And then in high school, after my freshman year, one of my cousins mentioned that she was writing a book. And I don't know why my competitive streak decided to come out, but I was like, I'm going to finish my book before she finishes her book. And so that's how I ended up finishing that first book at 16, is because I was just like, I worked every day after school. My sophomore year, I'd sit at the table in the mall. My sister worked at a store there. And so after school, I'd go over there with her and I'd just sit at a table and I'd do whatever homework I could as fast as I could. And then I'd just sit and write on an old laptop that was like a leftover from my dad from work that, so it was slow. It could handle word processing, not much else beyond that. But I don't know, something about writing every single day and pouring myself into this story, I feel like it helped me deal with all of the things that come with being a teenager, right? All of the insecurity and the trying to find who you are in the world and trying to kind of orient yourself according to your peers and everything. And so it just really, I don't know, it became something that I loved, and I just decided, I'm going to do this, whether or not I can do it professionally, whether or not I can make any money on it. Like, writing is something that will be a part of my life.
So did you work through the angst of being a teenager and figuring all that out through a character? Or your characters doing the same things that you were figuring out?
So it's interesting because I write fantasy, which, so it's not, she's not going to a high school. She's not going through the same kinds of things that I am directly. But I think just being able to take any emotion, whether it was a negative one or an excited one or falling in love for the first time or any of those kinds of things, and being able to pour those into the ways that characters react to things, the situations they find themselves in, even if they're not necessarily directly correlated, I feel like it still helped work through and get some of those emotions on the page in a way that then subconsciously my brain could work away and be okay with things, or
Tell me what the speculative genre is and their possible impact on the reader.
Yeah, so speculative fiction is just kind of an umbrella term for anything that has something non-realistic in it. So science fiction, fantasy, horror, anything where, even if it's in our world, but there's something that's just slightly different, that's speculative, right? If there's something that is not actually a part of our life. They've done studies that show that reading fiction can help. It helps us put us in each other's shoes. So if you're reading a book and you're experiencing things that a character is experiencing, it actually lights up the same pathways in your brain. They've done all sorts of tests and things that show that if someone is reading about, a person jumping into a cold pool, the same areas of their brain light up as though they themselves were jumping into a cold pool. So you think about all the different things that you can experience through a book. And realistic fiction, you're experiencing things you probably never would have experienced in your own life. You're processing things, but you're at a little bit more of a distance, right? It gives you that a little less of the immediacy, so that it gives your brain and your emotions time to kind of sort through and understand and figure out, like, this is what trauma feels like. This is how I could deal with it and adjust and whatever. But when you add that speculative element, it both takes that distance further because you're on a different planet or in a world where there's magic or dragons or, things that your brain knows, okay, these things are not real. So on the one hand, it puts more of a barrier there, which I think helps with the being able to process it. But on the other hand, it removes some of the, maybe the preconceptions that you might have about this kind of a person or this kind of a situation, and narrows that distance in that way where it allows you to completely immerse yourself more and to experiencing them in a way that you don't come into it with all of the prejudice or any of the preconceived notions that you might have, and lets you actually empathize more with the character or with their situation.
So I would think, when you were talking, I was thinking, actually, you can read a book that's realistic and get confused because you're wishing that would have happened to you, or you can get traumatized by a similar circumstance, and then you don't want to. It's uncomfortable to read. So I can see what you're saying. Like in one of my favorite books by Ray Bradbury, there is the happiness machine. One of the characters makes a happiness machine, and what it is a machine that shows images of things that are supposed to make you happy, places and things. And his wife goes in there and she's just miserable when she comes out, because it's things that she now will never go to and never have. So it's the opposite of what he expected. So when you're talking, it reminded me of that. So when you read realistic fiction, it can leave you feeling like you'll never go there. You'll never have that. You never had that. Well, when you're saying you read fantasy, you'll never have that. No one will ever have that.
Absolutely,
So,
yeah.
is that what you're kind of saying?
Yeah, I think it relates to that a little bit. I mean, I think you can definitely still have the feeling of, well, I'll never be able to go, somewhere that there's magic. I'll never be able to ride a dragon. There's still, I think, some of that sadness that doesn't exist. I mean, you see that in the way that people, some of the fandoms and things of major fantasy genres, you look at like Harry Potter and the people that invented Quidditch because they felt so left out, right? So I think there still is some of that, but I think more what it is that when you're immersing yourself in a book with fantasy or science fiction, you're finding out new things about their culture, new things about, maybe there's weird fruit that they eat, or weird, things that your brain is automatically like, this is strange. And because your brain is so busy focusing on the things that are different and weird and cool and kind of getting that sense of wonder for the world, the emotional impacts of those stories are able to kind of sneak their way in a little bit more directly, I think. Where while you're, focused on all the things that are cool and you love, you don't realize that I'm watching this character process depression. I'm watching them learn how to fight for what they believe in. I'm watching them have courage and learn what it means to actually be brave even though they're scared. Or I'm learning to accept the differences in, different cultures by seeing how these two different, wildly different than any Earth culture, can come together and find a solution to things. And so I think that strangeness in some ways helps those emotional impacts to sneak in a little bit better than they do with regular fiction. Another thing with reading science fiction and fantasy or any speculative genre is that they call it a mix of the familiar and the strange, is kind of what readers are looking for when they pick up that kind of book. And the strange can be looking for that sense of wonder where it's, magic and things that are bigger or brighter or cooler than what we have here. Or it can be, on the other end of the spectrum, you've got horror where things are terrifying and worse than you could ever expect them to be here. And then you have the familiar, that the books that really hit, the stories that really actually impact people, that, whether or not they become hugely popular, but the ones that someone reads it and they love it for whatever reason, are the ones that have that strangeness, but also the familiar, something that resonates with someone, right? Whether it's, I've gone through, bullying, or I've gone through feeling different. I've been the outcast. I've felt, like I'm not the same as everyone else, or, I've been through some traumatic thing, or whatever experience that they've had that they're struggling with in life. Often you can kind of find a mirror in stories, right? And you get that in both realistic fiction and in speculative fiction, where being able to feel like, oh, I'm not alone in this, other people have experienced this. Even if it's the fictional character, the fact that the fictional character has experienced it kind of tells us that, oh, other people, like this author, may have experienced it, or they've talked to people who have experienced it, and it makes us feel like we're less alone. And it really helps. It helped me as a teenager, and I think it helps even as adults for us to kind of see and experience that there's other ways to deal with this. There's things that I can do, even just the I'm not alone aspect of it, I think has a bigger impact than we even could think.
I love what you say. I think there's a famous author who wrote, "We read so we know we're not alone." But I don't remember who said that.
I've heard that quote before too, but I don't know who said it.
Lewis? I don't know. The reluctant hero comes to mind as well.
Mm-hmm.
The reluctant hero comes to mind, people like that, and people who don't know they're heroes until they're tested, because they think they could be the hero if they think so. Harry Potter relates to people because he doesn't know he's special until he's tested. And that's why people like him, because, they could be a hero.
Yeah. We call that the everyman character. You see that too with like Samwise Gamgee in Lord of the Rings, right? He's just a gardener, but he is loyal to a fault. Like he's just going to go with his friend to help his friend do this impossible task that he's been set to bring the ring to Mount Mordor and destroy it. And a lot of readers and watchers, if they've seen the movies of Lord of the Rings, they look at that character, and almost everyone's favorite character is Sam. And it's because of that everyman characteristic where it's, he might not be cool like Aragorn, might not be able to fight, might not be able to wield a bow like Legolas, or, be a dwarf and do dwarfish things like Gimli. He may not, be a wizard like Gandalf, but he's a good friend. And I think readers and watchers, they see that and they say, well, I can be a good friend. Like I can be supportive. I can be loyal. And, if he's just a gardener and he can, be the ultimate hero of this story, like I can do that too.
Neville Longbottom. So
Yep. Same exact concept there.
tell me about one of your characters and what kind of hero they are.
So the books that I have coming out in about a month here is called The Voyage of Clara Bowman. And Clara she's an 18-year-old girl, and she's very naive. She has very little experience in the world. And when she starts off on this voyage, she has all of these preconceptions. Everyone, it's funny, a lot of the advanced readers that I've had reading it are just like, oh my goodness, like there you go, judging someone again, or there you go. And so the story takes her through this learning experience of being able to drop the judgment, to see people more as they really are, rather than making kind of that snap, like, ugh, they're this person's so stuck up, or they're so arrogant, or whatever, and then learns more about them and realizes, like, no, they're doing these things to keep us safe, or they're doing these things to make sure that things work out the way that they're supposed to. And one thing that she always has going for her in the story is she's very tenacious. Like, she goes after what she wants, which I feel like we wrote that kind of intentionally in it, because you have to have a level of tenacity to go through the kinds of things that she goes through and get to the end of it. And she also has just kind of this wonder for the world, where with people, she's kind of figuring out where she is in relation to them. But with the world in general, she loves looking at the sunlight on the leaves, or listening to the birds sing in the trees in the morning, or just being out on the ocean and the amazing view on the ocean. Those kinds of things we really brought out. So those are kind of some of her key characteristics.
What kind of world does she live in?
It's a very similar world to our own. We didn't take it wildly different, as far as there's not overt magic in the world, but it's more of a late 1700s, early 1800s kind of society setting. And so she's got they've got marketplaces. There's no mass-produced things. There's not really factories of any kind. The ships are old-fashioned sailing ships. She's a member of a religious group that is kind of ostracized from others, and so the thing that kicks off the whole story is that the government has decided that it's illegal for them to tell anyone talk about their beliefs at all, which kind of gradually turns into it's illegal to have those beliefs. And so it's kind of a similar story to like the Puritans in early America, where they left England looking for somewhere where they would be able to practice their religion freely. And so she sets off on this voyage to find what her people call the land of origin. And it's just kind of this mythical place that is supposed to be, a paradise that they can go and live in. So the politics of the world are similar, but it's a fantasy world, so there's differences between that and our historical world. The land that she travels from is similar to England, kind of a more rustic England, but then the one she goes to is a little bit more like a Caribbean island, or like South America. It's a jungle with there's some native tribes, and there's all sorts of crazy plants and animals and things they encounter in the jungle that's kind of where the more magical part comes in this particular story, is that there's plants that grow overnight amazingly fast, and then there's plants that are thousands of years old that are huge and whatever, and there's animals that they just don't really follow the rules of nature in our world.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I was going to ask you if your classes in European history impact your writing, and I think you answered that question.
Yeah, they definitely do.
With respect.
So I took those classes specifically because, rather than taking classes on writing, which I probably should have taken more creative writing classes, but those were harder to get into, I took the history classes because I thought, these will give me all sorts of cool ideas, and I feel like they really did.
You gotta have material to work from.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool that you base it on knowledge, and that the fantasy world is also not knowledge, because you can make it out of anything. Just your imagination can go, and you don't have to worry about laws, but you have to worry about laws because they have to make sense in your story. So that can be kind of tricky.
It is an interesting balance trying to you have to have you'll have, even in realistic fiction, you'll have this kind of thing where people say, oh, that's not possible. Like, they couldn't, go that long without sleeping, or they couldn't, do that kind of a trick or you see it in action movies all the time where people get thrown out because they're like, oh, this was, there's no way he could beat up that many guys and then come out and be able to then do this other thing. And so in fantasy, you have that to even kind of a greater extent where on the one hand, you're asking people to just pretend that dragons are real for a minute, right? Kind of thing. And they'll believe that, but then they won't believe that, like, this guy wouldn't just go talk to the girl that he likes, the more simple, mundane thing. And so trying to find that balance between how unrealistic can I make things and what do I need to anchor in reality in order to keep the reader immersed and not have them just, get thrown out of the story.
Well, Swiss Family Robinson had animals that would never have lived where they landed. So, we ignore a lot of stuff if the story is good enough and we like the characters.
Yep. So. Yeah. And that's the key, I think, is you get a character that someone can identify with, that they feel like they just really want to know what happens to them, and they'll forgive a multitude of sins. We just want
to see how they're going to handle whatever situation they get in because we like the character. Right. And before I got to know about your baking. I'm going to switch from writing to baking because baking is a science. I mean, you can stir fry stuff, but baking, you got to get it right. Tell me what you love to bake. It's fascinating to me. The writing and the baking.
No, I love baking pretty much anything. I've been baking about as long as I've been writing. I think it was 3rd grade I made my birthday cake for the first time too. So I love making French bread.
Just a minute. So you write the stories you want to read and you bake the things you want to eat.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. No, baking I think it's a creative outlet that's different from writing. So when my brain is tired from all the words and can't put 2 sentences together, I can still go in the kitchen. I can make some French bread or whip up some huckleberry scones or whatever strikes my fancy.
Huckleberry. The first time I had that was when I went to Yellowstone.
Yep. I'm in Montana, so that's our thing. We go out and we pick huckleberries in the summertime and freeze them for the wintertime, and yeah, they're delicious and amazing.
Man, that's good. So you knew you wanted to write, so you wrote. You like to bake, so you bake. That's amazing. Because a lot of people just sit around and they think about a story and they read a book and they think, oh, I could write it better than that, but they never even try.
Yep.
So you had the guts, and you have the guts to put your name on a book. And one of your latest is a collaboration with another artist, writer, artist, creative. To me, it's all together.
Yep, they're all one and the same.
Yeah.
Different
so
meanings.
Is she a part of your bigger tribe? Do you have a small tribe? Tell me about the tribe you work with.
So my family's been super supportive of me from the beginning, right? Like my parents were willing to get me an old laptop and let me type, and they've read pretty much all of my books and stories at one point or another. And, they never told me, oh, this is something you can't do, or this is, too lofty a goal. When I was deciding what to major on in college, I was the one that was like, maybe I'll go for elementary education or history, not writing. They were never the ones to be like, oh, do something practical because writing will never make it. Like, they were very much like, follow your dreams. So my parents were really instrumental there. My older sister was my first pass reader for all of my books, would read through and give me notes on whether things were, no, this is ridiculous, they won't believe that, or this is getting a little boring here, or whatever. She was very supportive that way. And then my younger sister will just give me all of the best reactions. So my older sister is also a bit of a grammar Nazi. So she will peg any little mistakes. She'll say, nope, like 1,000,000 commas and you don't need that many. Or why does every sentence end in ellipses? Like, she'll call me on all that stuff. My younger sister, she's my cheerleader. She will 100% just read through all of the books and give her honest reactions. And they're usually things like, oh my goodness, don't do that. Or this is so amazing. Or no, when are they going to kiss? Or all the things that just make you feel so good as a creator when it feels like someone's enjoying your work. So those are kind of my core elements. And then also my writing partner, Michaela, who I wrote this last book with. When she first floated the idea of writing a book together, I was like, I am not. Like, when I write, it's like, I want to do things the way that I want to do them. And I was like, I don't know if I can let someone else in on that process. Like, even when I'd tell people my story ideas and they'd be like, "Ooh, you should have this happen," my reaction was always like, "No, I don't want to have that happen. I'm going to have this thing I want to have happen." But like we'd been good friends for a while, and so I was like, I'll give it a go. Why not? And it's actually been really amazing. Like we'll brainstorm a little bit and then decide, okay, do you want to write this part or I want to write that part? And having someone to bounce those ideas off of, and then being able to kind of craft the story together and be able to say, it's helped me in some ways to articulate more like, well, I want this to happen because of this, this, and this. And so it's enabled me to view my writing a little bit deeper, and to be able, rather than just kind of have that instinctive, I like it because I like it. I've had to explain, oh, I want this to happen because of this. And most of the time when we can do that, if she says, oh, I don't like this sentence because it's doing this, this, and this, then I'll look at it and I'll see, oh, it is kind of doing that. So how can we fix it? How can we make it a way that we both get what we want? Which is interesting. I was listening to one of your other episodes where he talked about compromise and how he hates the word compromise, and it should be working together to find a solution that is good for both of you rather than each giving up some stuff. I feel like that's really how my process with Michaela has been, where we're, rather than, well, I'll give in on this part, so you give in on this part. It's no, how can we both get what we want out of this scene or out of this paragraph to be able to craft a story that we both want to tell.
So you collaborate together.
Yes, absolutely.
So speaking of that, could you please read a little bit about actually, you could get a free story from your webpage when you subscribe. Can you read a little bit of an excerpt from that story?
Yeah, so this is called On the Edge, and it's a side character from the book that we have coming out, and this is an experience from when he was a teenager. So I'm just going to read a couple paragraphs. If you would like to read the rest, you can get it on my website. The jungle whispered. Most people explained it away as the wind moving through the fronds or the echoes of distant wildlife calling to each other. To them, it was just a faint background murmur, and they ignored it. Sanji couldn't. The whispers drew him to the edge of the trees, and he peered into the shadows as he walked along the border. In them, he heard faint voices, muffled cries of pain, silent weeping, muted warnings. He knew they weren't real. The elders had told him as much. The aunties had looked on him with eyes full of sympathy and moved their children away. They didn't hear what he heard. They hadn't been inside.
Thank you. Now I want to know.
Thank you, yeah. Well, you gotta go get the story, read the rest of it.
So, Trenna, tell us where we can find you and find out more about you.
Yeah, so on all social media, it's just Trenna McMullin. So Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, though I'm not on there as much since it became X. My website is trennamcmullin.com. And on my website, you can sign up for my newsletter. I don't send like a weekly or monthly or whatever. I just do an annual newsletter. And then anytime there's actual news, like, hey, there's this book coming out in a month, or big news kind of thing, so it won't be inundating your inbox. If you sign up for that newsletter, you get access to this short story that's set in the world that the Voyage of Clara Bowman is in. And I'm happy to make new friends on social media, to chat. If anyone wants to ask me questions about writing, good with that. Questions about the stories, good with that.
So thank you very much, Trenna, for meeting with me today. And thanks for listening. Visit knowitliveit.net for the latest scoops, recaps, and more. Remember to like, leave a comment, and subscribe to this podcast. Don't miss an episode with a fascinating person who live what they know.
Know it, live it, feel that magic flow. Conversations rich like a river's timeless glow. Passions on the schedule, purpose in the heart. Join us on this journey and find your